questions that she has received from a lot of our clients and just share them generally with folks. Thank you everyone who has muted yourself. I absolutely appreciate that. Just a little bit about us, the Kaputa Group. We are kind of a full meal deal. We are your HR group or HR department. We kind of focus on small, medium-sized businesses so that you guys can focus on what you do well, and then we handle all the paperwork, basically giving you the opportunity to excel. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Marilyn. Marilyn, thank you so much again, and on to you.
Thank you, Maud. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited to share this information with you guys. But before I start, I do want to let you know, can we go to the next slide, that this presentation is intended solely for general educational purposes. The information provided here does not constitute legal, tax, or financial advice. It does not consider your particular circumstances or legal and financial situation or needs. Before acting on any information, please consider the appropriateness of the information for your situation in consultation with a professional advisor of your choice. As you know by now, this is a rapidly changing area of law and will be subject to change and interpretation. So now that the fun stuff's out of the way, next slide. All right, so we're going to jump into CDC guidelines. CDC has a great tool where you can just go online onto Google and just put in CDC's interim guidance for businesses and employers. That webpage is updated daily, so you can see the new guidelines that are going into effect. But the basic ones are, if you are a business that is still open, make sure you are providing masks for your team members or asking them to wear them. Things such as providing hand sanitizers, gloves, and disinfecting wipes. Make sure you schedule someone or appoint someone to use the disinfecting wipes to clear the knobs or any general area that is used by people. Another thing is to eliminate shared food. I know everyone wants to be kind to each other right now and help each other out, but please avoid sharing food or doing potluck. Do encourage your customers to do tap and pay or online payments. Try to avoid cash payments as much as possible so we're stopping the spread of germs. Last but not least is to follow social distancing of 6 feet. Next slide. All right, OSHA. OSHA has put out some great resources and reminders for us, for business owners. The last thing you want to do is something to happen or an employee to call in sick and say, hey, I tested positive, and you're panicking, you have no idea what to do. So in order to avoid that, please do develop an infectious disease preparedness and response plan, as well as your policies and procedures for prompt identification and isolation of those that are sick. Some of the things you can continue doing to control and prevent this germs from spreading is making sure you are washing your hands regularly. Try to avoid touching your face as much as possible. And if you are sick and experiencing any of the symptoms of COVID-19, please do stay home and consult your healthcare provider. Next slide. If you are in business that is under 500 employees, this applies to you. The Department of Labor has introduced the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. It was signed into law on March 18th and goes into effect, went into effect April 1st and is good till December 31st of 2020. The law, what the act is it introduced the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act and the Emergency or Expanded Family and Medical Leave Expansion Act. This is for employers that private sectors, if you have fewer than 500 employees, you need to follow this. If you are a public agency, regardless of how many employees you are entitled to follow this Response Act. Next slide. So the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act, who gets to use it? What qualifies is if your employee is subject to federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order related to COVID, or if they are experiencing any symptoms of COVID-19, or if they're taking care of someone in their household that is experiencing symptoms of COVID-19. They get to use the Paid Sick Leave Act. Also, if they're caring for their children that are out of school or don't have childcare, they can use the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act. The duration of the leave is full-time employees may use up to 80 hours, and part-time, you would have to calculate their average of the last 2 weeks or the 2-week period, and then they would be eligible to use that amount. Next slide. We're going to jump into the Emergency or Expanded Family and Medical Leave Act. The eligibility for this is your employee has to work with you at least 30 days and is actively scheduled for work. The reason they can use this leave is they don't have someone to care for their child because their childcare closed down due to COVID-19. The first 10 days are unpaid. However, you can encourage your employees to use any paid accrued time off for those 10 days. If the employee is able to do this, if the leave is foreseeable, please ask them to provide a notice, something as simple as their name, the date they're requesting it, and the reason. It doesn't have to be very specific, just something as simple as childcare due to COVID-19. Something as simple as that, and file it away in their employee file. They can also use this in increments, so they don't have to use all of it at once. They can use 4 hours on Thursday and 4 hours next week on a Tuesday. So I would encourage you to be as flexible as possible with your team members so they can get work as well as take care of their family. Next slide. Okay, so what is the difference between furlough and laid off? Furloughed is pretty much your employees are still on payroll, even though they may be getting paid, they may not be getting paid, depends on your company circumstances. But furlough is pretty much they're on payroll and their benefits still continue. Laid off is a temporary suspension or separation from your payroll. So they're no longer on your payroll and they can go and apply for unemployment at that point. Next slide. The CARES Act, when it comes to the unemployment eligibility, as of right now, they do get an additional $600 a week for the pandemic emergency unemployment. That is only good until July 31st, 2020. That's as of right now. So I'm sure, hopefully they'll extend it if we continue to be in this pandemic. Other than that, all the other unemployment insurance eligibility requirements are the same. They basically can apply for unemployment if they are no longer working due to COVID-19. So if someone quits, they do not qualify, but please do remember that every state sets their own guidelines when it comes to unemployment, and they will make the decision whether the employee is eligible or not. Next slide. And they can go to their state unemployment department website to file for their unemployment. I know it's a little difficult right now to get them over the phone, so my best bet for you right now is to let your employees know to continue calling them. Try calling them first thing in the morning or even sending emails. A lot of people have said that they're getting responses to emails more so than people actually getting through on their phones. Next slide, please. All right, this is more for the employers. So the SBA part of the CARES Act has Paycheck Protection Program. All small businesses are eligible. The loan has a maturity rate of 2 years with a 1% interest rate. You do not have to make any loan payments for the first 6 months, and the loan covers 8 weeks starting from the origination date. So if your origination date is today, that 8 weeks starts today. You can't go back 2 weeks or 2 months. 75% of the loan must be used to fund payroll and employee benefit costs, and the remaining 25 you can use it towards your mortgage, mortgage interest payments, rent or lease payments, and utilities. Just make sure you keep a record of every penny that you're using from this PPP loan, because if they when they ask you for records, you just want to make sure that you are providing. So I would actually even open a separate account just for this loan purposes, so you can see what's coming in and what's going out, because I don't know about you guys, but I can't remember what I did yesterday. What includes the payroll cost? Things such as salary, wages, commissions, or tips. Be mindful that it is capped at $100,000 on annual basis for each employee. The documentation you would require to file for this is your payroll records, tax filings, tax forms for 2019. If you were a business that opened in 2020, so you would have to provide your January and February payroll tax record. As of right now, the qualifications for loan forgiveness is you have to use the money for your payroll purposes only, your mortgage payment, as well as rent and utilities. Do not spend it on anything else, otherwise it won't be forgiven. That's as of right now. Next slide, please. Okay, so the other part of the CARES Act is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. I know the first round went through, but the second round, they want to make sure that they are limiting these funds for dispersal to agricultural businesses and businesses who had already applied before the portal closed on April 15th. So if you haven't received funds or been approved, they are processing those applications now. Agricultural businesses that previously applied, you do not need to reapply. They are working those on first in, first out basis. The loan does carry a higher interest rate than PPP loan, which for this one is 3.75 for small businesses and 2.75 for nonprofits with a term up to 30 years. They do also offer eligible businesses a $10,000 cash advance grant. Just be mindful the documents required for this one are a little bit more than it would for the PPP loan. For the EIDL loan, you would need your tax information authorization form for your applicant, your principal, and your affiliates. Complete copies of your most recent federal income tax return, schedule of liabilities, your personal financial statements, profit and loss statements, and your monthly sales figures. Next slide, please. Okay, just because we have the CARES Act in place, please do not forget that we have existing employment laws. You still have to abide by your state equivalent OFLA, Family Leave Act, and your FMLA, as well as ADA. Be very mindful when you're asking your employees their symptoms. Please make sure they are very relevant to COVID-19 symptoms only. And then next slide. Make sure you are staying connected with your team members. There's nothing worse than your employees not knowing what's going on and hearing that information through a third party. If you furloughed your employees and you want to bring them back in phases, please make sure you communicate it to all your employees that this is your plan. So the ones that do get called back, don't pick up the phone and call the others and say, I got a call back, did you get a call back? And then it's just going to create a lot of chaos and anxiety. So please make sure you update all your employees at the same time. Next slide. We've got a bunch of links up here for you guys, for like SBA, CDC. Be sure to check them out. They have great information and they are updated very frequently. And as always, if you have any questions, my email is down below. So send me an email and I will be more than happy to help you guys. I think that's all for me, Maud.
Marilyn, thank you absolutely so much for doing all this research and sharing all of your fantastic information. I absolutely appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn. This is really good. I'm going to be sending this on to some people.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Marilyn? Any specific kind of concerns about any of this information? I think one of the ones that that when I was listening to Marilyn, that really struck me is remembering that ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. Well, Marilyn, can you talk a little bit more about the difference between non-COVID times and asking your employees about symptoms under the ADA versus now?
Yeah. So one of the examples I like to use is before you could, under the ADA, you could not check people's temperature because that's considered a medical exam, and that is something a professional would do. That's just a violation of their healthcare. Well, right now, as of today, we can check for people's temperature before they report to work. However, please have a plan in place. Designate one person to do it, and make sure they have all the necessary equipment to take the temperature. And if they need to communicate to the employee, make sure it's done privately and not in a group setting. So have the same procedure, the same person do this for everyone. Don't pick and choose. Today so-and-so's going to do it and it's going to be out here in public. Just make sure you are staying as confidential as possible.
Thanks, Marilyn. Does anyone else, and feel free, I'm pretty sure everyone has the ability to unmute yourself. Let me double check. Yeah, feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question for Marilyn. It looks like we have one. If employees are brought back via oh golly, gee willikers, sorry guys. If employees are brought back with less hours than normal, can they file for unemployment for the difference?
If you are getting a PPP loan, I would advise you to put them on payroll for the regular amount. However, if not, they can definitely apply for partial unemployment with their state unemployment department.
So they can get.
Yeah.
But maybe it's harder to do, hard to get through or something like that?
It's actually not hard to get through. You would just report them saying that you're working 20 hours versus 40 of your regular time. So unemployment would approve you for 20 and you would be working 20 hours.
Got it. Okay, cool. Thank you. Are there any other questions for Marilyn? Marilyn, one of the questions that comes up for me is recording and reporting. What are the requirements if somebody does give you a call or something and says they can't come in? Actually, it's kind of a two-part question. What if somebody calls and says they're just scared and don't want to come into work, but you do have work for them? And then what do you do if somebody, can't take care of their child? Or needs to take care of their child? How do you record that?
So if someone's afraid to come into work, but don't have the symptoms or any other reasons related to COVID-19, that does not qualify the FFCRA requirements. So at that point, they would have to use their accrued paid time off or take an FMLA without being unpaid. Okay. If it's a childcare scenario and they don't have anyone to take care of their child, they can definitely use the EPSL or the EFMLA. But just remember, the EFMLA, the first 10 days are unpaid.
Got it.
But if you can work with your employees and say, can you work 16 hours and then you can have the rest time off, please do so. I know some people can split their childcare duties with their spouse or partners. So just be mindful if they're scheduled and try to accommodate it as much as possible.
Fantastic. Does anyone else have any questions for Marilyn? Fantastic. Well, Marilyn, thank you so very, very much for sharing all of your information with us today. Just real quick, I know that's kind of just for the audience, it's a bit of an alphabet soup with OFLA and, all these letters. Does everyone feel kind of a little bit more? We'll have the slides available on the Caputa Group website to look back over, but is everyone feeling comfortable with the alphabet soup that is human resource laws and kind of the differences that have come up now? Sounds like everybody is. Marilyn, thank you so much again. I absolutely appreciate your time today. It was fantastic. Thank you so much. And everyone, thank you so much for joining us. I absolutely appreciate your jumping on, and we'll be back next week with reopening your draft lines and draft quality. So we have, Charlie, you want to talk a little bit about who we have coming on?
Next week, we have an old friend of mine from the beer business named Neil Whitty. Neil is from the Midwest. He was with Boulevard Brewing Company for years, and then Duvel. He moved through the ranks with them. Now owns his own draft company, draft quality company, Craft Quality Solutions. And he is also one of the, I don't know how many there are now, it evolves, but I think there's 15 or 17 master cicerones in the world, and he is one of the master cicerones. So the man knows his beer. He's going to come on and talk about just draft quality and reopening your lines, cleaning, helping with, where stored beer, what's been going on, if you can put it back on, if you can't, CO2 issues, stuff like that. And he's an expert. Thank
you, Charlie. Thank you again, Marilyn, and thank you everyone for jumping on, and we'll hopefully see you next week.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.